They don't even make rifles your size. The laughter rolled across the training range like a careless wind. And that gun, it's taller than you. More laughter. She didn't respond. She never did. The Barrett .50 caliber rifle lay on the bench in front of her like a sleeping giant, massive, cold, mechanical. The steel barrel stretched forward with intimidating length, longer than her arm span. The bipod dug into the concrete. Even resting still, it looked powerful enough to bend gravity. She was 5'4". The rifle weighed nearly 30 pounds. The distance marker downrange read, 3,200 meters. 2 miles. A distance where most shooters could barely see a man-sized target through mirage heat shimmer. A distance where wind stopped being wind and started becoming a living thing. Behind her, the murmurs continued. SEAL qualification record is 2,970 meters. She won't even make half that. Someone get a ladder so she can reach the scope. A few instructors stood with folded arms. Some skeptical, some amused, one or two genuinely curious. But she ignored them all. Her name was Lieutenant Mara Reyes. And she wasn't here to impress anyone. She was here to break something. The old record had stood untouched for years, 2,970 meters. A shot so difficult it required perfect atmospheric calculations, perfect wind reading, perfect timing, and almost supernatural patience. It belonged to a male SEAL sniper who had retired into legend. No woman had even attempted the 3,000-meter barrier in official qualification. Until today, Mara adjusted the rear bag beneath the stock. The rifle barely shifted under her small frame. She leaned forward, body aligned behind the recoil path. Not fighting the rifle, becoming one with it. The desert air shimmered. 3,200 meters away, the steel silhouette target was almost invisible to the naked eye. Through her high-powered optic, it appeared like a faint ghost floating in heat waves. She closed one eye, inhaled. The mocking voices faded. The desert faded. The weight of expectation faded. All that remained was math. Wind. 6 miles per hour left to right at firing position. But 1,200 meters out, the mirage suggested crosswinds shifting. She adjusted. Up 28 MOA. Right 6.5. Heartbeat slowed. Breathing controlled. Her finger rested on the trigger like it was glass. Someone behind her whispered loudly. "This is embarrassing." She exhaled halfway. Paused. The world stopped moving. The rifle thundered. The recoil slammed backward into her shoulder like a hammer strike. Dust exploded around the muzzle brake. The echo rolled across the desert hills. 3 full seconds passed. 1, 2, 3. A faint metallic ping carried back on the wind. The spotter froze. Silence spread across the range. "Impact," he said quietly. No one laughed. Mara didn't smile. She adjusted again. Because one hit wasn't enough. The record required confirmation. The second shot would define everything. The wind shifted slightly. She saw it in the mirage. Tiny corrections. Inhale. Half exhale. Break. The second shot cracked the air. Another long pause. Another metallic echo. Impact confirmed. Now nobody was speaking. She chambered a third round. Someone muttered, "She's going again." Yes, she was. Because she wasn't here to match the record. She was here to erase it. Wind ticked higher. She recalculated in seconds. The third shot fired. This time, the wait felt longer. 4 seconds. Then, ping. Clear. Solid. Undeniable. The spotter lowered his binoculars slowly. 3 impacts. 3,200 meters. The instructor stared at her. The laughter was gone. One of the men who had mocked her earlier swallowed hard. That's past the SEAL record. Mara rose slowly from the rifle. Her shoulder burned. Her cheek carried a faint red mark from recoil. But her face remained calm. "That gun is taller than you," one of them had said. Now it looked smaller somehow. Because she had just made history. But what they didn't know was that this wasn't the hardest shot she would ever take. Weeks later, a classified briefing room would change everything. A map glowed on the wall. Mountain range, hostile territory, high-altitude village under insurgent control. An American reconnaissance team was trapped, pinned by enemy overwatch from ridgelines that dominated every escape route. Weather conditions, thin air, unstable winds, 3,000+ meter firing lanes. Helicopter extraction impossible, artillery too risky. The only solution, a precision long-distance neutralization. Someone would have to shoot from beyond the enemy's expected range. Someone who could operate where oxygen thinned and ballistics changed drastically. The room was quiet when her name was spoken. "Lieutenant Reyes." One commander raised an eyebrow. "Isn't she the one who—" "Yes, Another replied. 3,200 meters. There was hesitation. A few older officers exchanged looks. She's small. The colonel shut the folder firmly. She's effective. 2 days later, she was in a transport helicopter flying toward a mountain staging zone. The temperature dropped rapidly as elevation increased. The rifle lay secured beside her. The same rifle they mocked. The same rifle that had rewritten the record books. But now the stakes weren't reputation. They were lives. 7 reconnaissance SEALs trapped in a stone compound. Enemy fighters positioned above them. If she missed, those men would die. The helicopter landed roughly on a rocky plateau. Thin air hit her lungs immediately. Breathing felt different, heavier, slower. She adjusted. She always adjusted. The climb to her firing position took hours. Loose rock, snow patches, wind cutting across exposed ridges. Her spotter, Chief Donovan Hale, moved beside her in silence. He had been at the range that day. He had heard the laughter. He hadn't laughed. Now he looked at her with something else entirely. Respect. They reached the ridgeline at dusk. 3,200 meters across the valley, enemy muzzle flashes flickered from elevated rock formations. Below them, the trapped team's last transmission crackled. We can't move. Sniper overwatch on all sides. Mara lay prone behind her rifle. The altitude changed everything. Bullet velocity, drag coefficient, wind behavior, even Coriolis effect became significant at this distance. She ran calculations in her head while Donovan confirmed through a ballistic computer. Target 1, elevation plus 31 MOA. Wind 8 miles per hour variable. She studied the shimmer through her optic. The enemy sniper was barely visible. A speck behind a stone barricade. Distance, 3,275 meters. Further than her record, further than qualification, further than comfort. Donovan glanced at her. You good? She nodded once. He keyed the radio. Stand by. The wind gusted, then calmed, then shifted again. The window would be seconds long. She steadied her breathing despite thin oxygen. Half inhale, half exhale. Finger took up slack. Break. The rifle roared across the valley. Recoil slammed back. The sound echoed violently through the mountains. 4 seconds. 5, 6. Through the optic she saw movement. Then the enemy sniper collapsed backward. Silence. Radio crackled. Overwatch down. We saw it. But she wasn't finished. There were 2 more enemy positions covering escape routes. And the wind was rising. Donovan adjusted quickly. Target 2. Slight left. 3,290 meters. Her pulse remained steady. No laughter now. No mockery. Only responsibility. She shifted the bipod slightly into stone. Aligned. Calculated. Fired. Another long wait. Impact. Second hostile neutralized. The trapped team began moving. But gunfire erupted from a third ridge, the hardest angle, the longest distance yet. Donovan's voice lowered. 3,340 meters. That was beyond any official military engagement shot recorded in their unit. The wind was unstable, oxygen thin, light fading. She studied the mirage. It twisted unpredictably across the valley. Her mind processed numbers at impossible speed. Gravity drop, air density, spin drift, Coriolis shift due to latitude. Everything. This shot wasn't about ego. It was about 7 men sprinting for their lives below. She felt something then, not fear, clarity. The same clarity she felt when they mocked her. When they underestimated her. When they laughed. The rifle settled. Her body aligned perfectly. She became still. The world narrowed to crosshairs floating on a distant shadow. She squeezed. The mountain answered with thunder. 5 seconds. 6. 7. The distant ridge flashed. Then went still. Radio erupted. We're clear. We're clear. Moving now. The extraction convoy rolled in from the far valley. The trapped team made it out alive. Later, back at base, the report would confirm it. Distance, 3,340 meters. The longest confirmed operational sniper engagement in their unit's history. Longer than the record they mocked. Longer than the qualification shot. Longer than anyone expected. When she walked into the mess hall days later, conversation slowed. Not because she demanded it, but because something had changed. One of the same men who laughed approached her quietly. I was wrong. She nodded. No anger. No pride. Just truth. You weren't the first, she said calmly. The mountains never forgot that shot. Word spread quietly at first. Not through headlines. Not through press releases. But through the only network that truly matters in special operations. Whispers. 3,340 meters. Mountain engagement. She did it in thin air. Wind was unstable. She saved 7. The official after-action report used controlled language. Measured. Professional. But inside closed doors, something else was happening. Respect was shifting. Weeks passed. The reconnaissance team she had saved returned to duty. Hardened men. Veterans. The kind who didn't impress easily. One of them, Chief Petty Officer Grant Miller, stood in front of a training class weeks later and said something simple. If you ever hear someone say distance doesn't matter, remember this. We're alive because one sniper ignored what people said was impossible. He didn't say her name. He didn't need to. Back at base, Mara continued training. No celebration, no interviews. No interviews meant no spotlight. She preferred it that way. But the command structure didn't. A sealed envelope arrived one morning. Inside, orders, advanced long-range tactical evaluation, invitation only, location, a remote high-desert range used for extreme ballistic testing. Participants, hand-selected operators from across multiple units, Army Rangers, Marine Recon, Air Force Special Tactics, Navy SEALs, and one name circled at the bottom, Lieutenant Mara Reyes. Someone had made a decision. She wasn't just being evaluated. She was being measured. When she arrived at the desert range, the air carried heat distortion even before sunrise. Targets were set at impossible distances. 2,500 meters. 3,000 meters. 3,500 meters. And one final steel plate positioned so far out that it looked imaginary. 3,800 meters. Nearly 2.4 miles. No official record existed for that distance under evaluation conditions. This wasn't qualification. This was experimentation. Operators gathered near their rifles, comparing setups. Custom optics, modified stocks, heavy caliber precision builds. She unpacked the same rifle. The same one they mocked. A few new faces noticed her immediately. One ranger smirked. That thing weighs more than you. Another Marine added quietly, heard about the mountain shot. Wind was probably lucky. She said nothing. Chief Donovan Hale stood beside her again as spotter. He looked at the target board. 3,800, he muttered. That's thin margin. She nodded. The first round of evaluation began at 2,500 meters. Most shooters hit confidently. At 3,000 meters, a few missed due to shifting crosswinds. At 3,500 meters, even experienced operators began struggling. Wind turned unpredictable. Mirage distortion intensified. Bullet flight time stretched long enough to make doubt grow mid-shot. Two shooters managed single impacts at 3,500. One hit twice. Then came the final target. 3,800 meters. The steel plate was just 36 inches wide. At that distance, it appeared smaller than a grain of sand in the optic. One by one, operators attempted. Miss. Miss. Near miss. Dust plumes kicked wide left. A shot drifted high from unexpected vertical wind shear. Ballistic calculators struggled to compensate for micro changes in temperature layers across that valley. After several attempts, only silence remained. An instructor stepped forward. Anyone else? Mara lay prone. She didn't rush. She studied. Wind flags downrange weren't synchronized. Left at firing point. Right at mid-valley. Calm near target. The bullet would cross 3 different wind environments over nearly 5 seconds of flight. Donovan adjusted the spotting scope. Vertical shift half MOA upward at 2,200 meters. She calculated. Spin drift. Coriolis effect due to latitude. Air density correction at current heat. Index. She dialed the optic slowly. The rifle felt steady. Not heavy. Not oversized. Just familiar. She inhaled deeply. Exhaled halfway. Paused. Trigger press. The rifle erupted. Recoil absorbed through disciplined posture. 4 seconds passed. 5. 6. The steel plate rang. Clear. Sharp. Impossible. Every head turned toward her. The instructor blinked. Impact. She chambered another round. The wind had shifted slightly. She waited. Adjusted 0.3 right. Fired. 5 seconds. Another ring. Now nobody spoke. The ranger who had smirked earlier lowered his binoculars slowly. She wasn't done. One more. The third shot was the hardest. Wind gusted mid-valley. Dust spiraled near 2,000 meters. Donovan whispered, "Short window." Now. She broke the shot. The longest 5 seconds of silence. Then, ping. 3 confirmed impacts at 3,800 meters. No celebration. Just stunned quiet. One instructor shook his head. That's beyond documented unit engagement distance. Another simply said, "We just watched history." Later that evening, senior leadership gathered. The conversation wasn't about her size anymore. It wasn't about the rifle. It wasn't about novelty. It was about capability. Do we update doctrine? One officer asked. Another responded, we update expectations. But the real test hadn't arrived yet. Months later, intelligence intercepted communications about a high-value hostile commander operating from a fortified compound deep within mountainous terrain. The compound sat protected by natural geography, sheer cliffs, narrow valley approaches, overlapping sniper nests. Airstrike risked civilian casualties. Ground assault guaranteed heavy losses. Distance from nearest viable firing position, over 3,500 meters. Weather forecast, high crosswinds, cold density air, low visibility windows. A briefing room fell silent. A colonel looked around the table. We have one option. Her name wasn't spoken. It didn't need to be. The insertion took place before dawn. She and Donovan moved under darkness, climbing toward a ridgeline that offered a narrow firing corridor across a vast canyon. Temperature dropped below freezing. Cold air thickened ballistic drag. She adjusted calculations accordingly. At position, she observed the compound through thermal optic. Target identified on rooftop balcony. Distance confirmed, 3,625 meters. Wind unpredictable across canyon depth. This was not a training evaluation. This was one chance. Below, a ground team waited, holding position. If she missed, the target would disappear underground. No second opportunity. She settled behind the rifle. Breath slow, calm. The cold bit at her cheek against the stock. Donovan confirmed data quietly. Left to right 9 miles per hour at origin. Switching mid-canyon. She waited, watched subtle thermal distortions. The target stepped closer to the balcony edge. Clear profile. No obstruction. She adjusted 0.4 left. Compensated elevation for cold dense air. The world narrowed again. Crosshairs steady. Trigger press smooth. The rifle cracked sharply in frozen air. Time stretched. 4 seconds. 5, 6. Through thermal optic, the target dropped instantly. Ground team radioed. Confirmed. Objective neutralized. Silence settled across the canyon. Not dramatic. Not loud. Just complete. Back at base, official reports were written. Distance logged. Wind data archived. Outcome confirmed. But something deeper changed. Training programs began including extended distance modules. Ballistic education expanded. Equipment standards adjusted. And in classrooms, new recruits heard a story. Not about a woman. Not about size. Not about mockery. But about discipline. Focus. Mathematics. Calm under pressure. The story of someone who didn't answer laughter with anger, but with precision. One afternoon, months later, a young female recruit approached her quietly at the range. They said the rifle would be too big for me. Mara looked at her for a long moment. Then she slid the heavy rifle forward across the bench. Lay down, she said calmly. Let's find out. The desert wind moved gently that day. No laughter, no doubt, just possibility. Years from now, records would change again. Distances would stretch further. Technology would improve. But somewhere in the archives, a note would remain. 3,200 meters. 3,340 meters. 3,800 meters. In the silence after the mockery ended, that was her true record. Not measured in meters, but in mindset.